Hello again. I'm back with another video. This is part one of Frank Lloyd Wright and the Taliesin Massacre in Kubrick's The Shining. For a while now we've been focusing on the January 1978 issue of Playgirl magazine, which is the issue of Playgirl we see Jack Torrance reading in the lobby of the Overlook Hotel. We've been focusing on page 10 of this for a while now, and you can go back to parts 1 through 5 of that video series if you wish. For this particular video, I want to branch off onto another subject. I do intend to return to this subject here of Playgirl, but for the time being what I want to do is introduce this short clip from the movie where Dick Halloran is giving Wendy and Danny Torrance a tour of the kitchen.
To eat up here a whole year and never have the same menu twice. Now, right here is our walk-in freezer. Now, this is where we keep all of our meat. You got 15 rib roasts, 30 10-pound bags of hamburger. We got 12 turkeys, about 40 chickens, 50 sirloin steaks, 2 dozen of pork roasts, and 20 legs of lamb. You like lamb, Doc?
No.
You don't? Well, what's your favorite food, then?
French fries and ketchup.
Well, I think we can manage that too, Doc. Come along now, watch your step.
So it would appear that there's really not much going on here. It's just a mundane scene where Dick Halloran is showing Wendy and Danny the walk-in freezer. However, I want you to replay that clip and focus on the door handle that Dick Halloran uses to open the door. As you can see here, the door handle is on the right-hand side of the door if you're on the outside looking towards it. That would mean that if you are on the inside of this room looking towards the door, it would be on your left-hand side. However, as you can see from this picture here, that's not the case. This would mean that, strictly speaking, this room here with all of this frozen meat is not the walk-in freezer that Halloran was referring to in the previous photo. This is some other cold room. So this is sort of interesting, but you may be wondering, well, what's the big deal here? The reason why I'm focusing on this particular issue here has to do with the idea of discrepancies and incongruities that occur throughout this movie. This is something that has puzzled a whole lot of people over the years, and if you're watching this video, you're probably one of them. I know I am. And it's my belief that these oddities and incongruities and discrepancies that occur throughout this movie are intentional. I believe Kubrick has done this intentionally, and I think this is an entirely reasonable position to take, given that Kubrick was famously very meticulous and very precise. And because he was so exacting in his work and how he made movies, to me it's just unthinkable that mistakes like we see here with the freezer door and other instances, it's just unthinkable that he would do these things unintentionally. So now the question becomes, what is the purpose of all of these discrepancies? What is Kubrick trying to accomplish by putting these oddities and puzzling aspects into The Shining? Now there's plenty of speculation out there as to what is going on, and if you've seen the movie Room 237, then you know there are lots of people out there with their own opinion. And if you're one of the few people who are actually paying attention to the videos I put out, then you know that it is my belief that this movie, The Shining, is really concerned with revealing the truth behind what happened at the August 15th, 1914 massacre at Frank Lloyd Wright's Taliesin home, which, by the way, I just want to again emphasize that Taliesin is a Welsh word for shining brow. So, from my point of view, when I see something odd like this with this freezer door, to me, this is a signal that Kubrick is trying to draw our attention to something having to do with the Taliesin Massacre and Frank Lloyd Wright. So with that in mind, let's revisit the cold room scene and try and think about what is going on here. The first thing Dick Halloran does when he walks in the room he says, well, this is where we keep all of our meat. Then he lists the meat that's the inventory of meat that's in that room there. 15 rib roasts, 30 10-pound bags of hamburger, 12 turkeys, about 40 chickens, 50 sirloin steaks, 2 dozen or 24 pork roasts, and 20 legs of lamb. So what Kubrick has done here essentially is given us a list of numbers: 15, 30, 12, about 40, 50, 24, or 2 dozen, and 20. And it's my belief or assertion that given the discrepancy with the freezer door, as I was detailed earlier, it's my belief that Kubrick wants us to do something with these numbers, and so the question is, well, what are we supposed to do with them? So, looking for an answer to this question, when you go back and play the clip of Halloran listing the meat there in the room, it's clear that he emphasizes the word all. As in, now this is where we keep all of our meat. So one educated guess we can make from this is that Kubrick wants us to sum up these numbers. Now, adding numbers together is simple enough, but the fact is that in this case we run into problems with one of the numbers, and that is the number 40. When you listen to Halloran listing the inventory, he doesn't give us the number 40, he says about 40. And so the problem that we have is, what are we supposed to do with that number? So at this point we have to make another educated guess, and I suggest the number 42. Now you may ask me, well, why number 42? The fact is, and this has been noted by other researchers of this movie, the number 42 pops up several times throughout the movie here, and I go into more detail regarding this particular number in part 1 of Kubrick's Catcher in the Rye Code. But just to briefly summarize, the first time we see Danny, he's wearing a shirt with the number 42 on it, and on several occasions we see 6 cases of 7-Up stacked one on top of each other, and 6 times 7 is 42. And also keep in mind that we see Wendy and Danny watching television, and they're watching a movie called Summer of 42, and what's striking about this scene is that this television that they're watching does not have an electrical cord going to it. So I believe this is Kubrick's way of calling attention to this particular movie and this particular number. So having settled on the number 42 in place of about 40, we can go about adding our numbers, and when we do that we end up with 193. So we've arrived at this number 193, and as I've mentioned before, I believe that this number is supposed to be associated somehow with Frank Lloyd Wright. And what I want to do now is spend a few minutes trying to justify that opinion to you, and as a first step towards that goal, I want to discuss another discrepancy in this movie, which involves the so-called gold room. Now, keep in mind that the gold room is where Jack Torrance has both of his conversations with Lloyd, the bartender. And as I go into detail in Kubrick's Catcher in the Rye video series, I make the assertion that Lloyd, the bartender, is really referring to Frank Lloyd Wright, and you can visit that video series if you want to look into that. To demonstrate to you the discrepancy I'm referring to regarding this room, I want to play the following clip where Stuart Ullman clearly refers to this room as the Gold Ballroom.
As a matter of fact, we brought a decorator in from Chicago just last year to refurbish this part of the hotel.
Oh, well, he sure did a beautiful job. Pink and gold are my favorite colors.
Ah, well, this is our gold ballroom.
So Ullman refers to the room as the Gold Ballroom, and as you can see there, the sign in front of that room says apparently the Gold Room. However, this actually isn't the case, and this is where this discrepancy with this room comes into play here. Other serious researchers of this movie have noted that when you look closely at this sign here, you can see that what it actually says is the Cold Room. A careful inspection reveals that it's not the letter G there, but it is in fact the letter C. And I want to emphasize this isn't an opinion, this is an objective fact. When you look at that letter there, it's clearly not the letter G. It is the letter C. So that would mean that the room where Jack Torrance and Lloyd the bartender have their conversation is really the Cold Room. And here is our connection between the number 193 and Frank Lloyd Wright. Dick Halloran gives his inventory list of frozen meat in a cold room where we got the number 193, and Jack Torrance has his conversation with Lloyd the bartender, who is, as I mentioned before, a reference to Frank Lloyd Wright, in the Cold Room, not the Gold Room. So, having established this connection between the number 193 and Frank Lloyd Wright, the next question we're faced with is, well, what exactly is 193 referring to? And one educated guess I would like to make is that Kubrick is trying to draw our attention to page 193 of Frank Lloyd Wright's autobiography, which was titled simply An Autobiography. And to be specific, I'm referring to the second edition, which was published by Faber and Faber in late 1945 or early 1946. Before proceeding to page 193 of Frank Lloyd Wright's autobiography, I think it would be useful to have a quick summary of the Taliesin Massacre. This is a picture of Mamie Borthwick Cheney. She was Frank Lloyd Wright's love interest at the time, and she and her two kids were killed at the Taliesin Massacre on August 15, 1914, along with 4 other people. The official story would have us believe that a handyman named Julian Carlton was solely responsible. However, when you look at the various messages which have been decoded from previous videos that I've done, it turns out that the person who was one of the main people who was really responsible was Herbert Grady Fritz, and apparently he was acting on behalf of Nathaniel Charles Rothschild. And as you can tell from message number 3 there, apparently Mamie and Frank Lloyd Wright were on the cusp of going public with the fact that Charles Rothschild was sexually abusing children. So with that very quick and perfunctory summary of the Taliesin Massacre out of the way, what I want to do is I want to show you page 193 from Frank Lloyd Wright's An Autobiography. Now, on the surface, there's not a whole lot going on here, it would seem. What he's talking about in this section of the book is the work that he did in designing and building the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo, Japan. However, I want to bring your attention to the first 3 lines up at the top of the page there. He does something sort of curious. He ends that first paragraph there with the question, why kill more? Now, why did I find this phrase interesting? Keep in mind that Frank Lloyd Wright was of Welsh descent, and the Welsh name for Mary is Mare. which is phonetically pronounced very similar to the English word more. So it occurred to me that what Frank Lloyd Wright is doing here is that he's cryptically going to ask and answer the question of why was Mema killed at Taliesin. So basically the idea is that there's a hidden message in the text following this question here, why kill more? And the task at hand is to determine or to make an educated guess as to which text we should include in the decoding process. With this question in mind, I want to draw your attention to the text which I've highlighted in green there. And I want to explain the reasons why I zeroed in on this particular group of text. Number one, the first sentence there, the outer walls were spread wide, thick, and heavy at the base, growing thinner and lighter toward the top. This sentence is directly after the question posed by Frank Lloyd Wright. So I think it's pretty obvious that that text should be included in the decoding process. Now that text afterwards, whereas Tokyo buildings were all top-heavy, the reason why I included this text is because when you look at that phrase there, it's not a complete sentence. To be grammatically correct, it should be combined with that first sentence there. So that's why I chose those two groups of phrases. Having settled on the text we want to decode, the next step is to break down the text in terms of letter frequency. And you can see that I've done that here in this slide. The numbers in blue are the frequency with which each letter of the alphabet occurs in the text there on the far left. So now the idea is to rearrange these letters into the message which Frank Lloyd Wright is trying to convey to us. Now towards that end, the fact is that Kubrick has given us a lot of help in doing this. We know from the previous messages which have been decoded in the previous videos which I've done, we know that Nathaniel Charles Rothschild hired or paid Herbert Grady Fritz, who was a draftsman working at Taliesin at the time, to commit these murders. And I've included the relevant messages there, as you can see in the middle of the box there. Now, another important biographical note to consider is that in the years prior to the Taliesin Massacre, Frank Lloyd Wright and Mema toured Europe for quite some time, and one of the places where they spent a lot of time was the Adlon Hotel in Berlin, Germany. The Adlon Hotel was a luxury hotel, and that's where they were staying for a good portion of their stay in Europe. So now it's just a lot of trial and error, a lot of grinding away, and having gone through that process, you can see here, this is the message at which I've arrived. Now I want to point out right off the bat, the numbers in red match the numbers in blue, which is a sign that this is probably pretty close to what Frank Lloyd Wright wanted to say. Now in the green box there, I've put the messages from the previous slide. Those were from Stanley Kubrick's letter in Playgirl magazine, and I wanted to put that in there to show you how well these messages here dovetail with each other, how they match each other, and basically reinforce each other. Now, one thing I want to do right off the bat here is I want to talk a little bit about that phrase I've highlighted in the green box there, lave ply. Now, in the context of this message, I think it's pretty clear that what Frank Lloyd Wright is saying, lave is a synonym for wash or splash, and ply, one of the meanings of ply is intertwine. So what he's saying here is that he and Mema saw Nathaniel Rothschild sexually molest two boys in a shower or bathtub or something of that nature. The exact scenario and circumstances aren't clear, but I think the general circumstances are. And the interesting thing is, while this may seem like an unconventional way to describe what he's trying to say, the fact is that a careful consideration of The Shining actually supports this phrase, and I want to spend a few minutes illustrating what I'm talking about here. First, as for the word ply, it turns out that Kubrick actually explicitly shows us this word in The Shining. I'm sure you remember that scene where Wendy is looking at the pages that Jack Torrance had typed up. It turns out that when you look carefully at that paper that is in the typewriter there, the word play is misspelled as the word ply on two separate occasions, as you can see here. And as a matter of fact, this misspelling actually helped me in the process of decoding the message that I unearthed in Kubrick's Catcher in the Rye Code, and you can revisit that video series if you want to check into that. Now, as for the word lave, I want to direct your attention to the beginning part of the movie. Recall just after Danny has his first vision, when he's in the bathroom, he blacks out, and when he regains consciousness, we see him being interviewed by the doctor. And so what I want to do to illustrate what I'm talking about here is I want to play a clip from the movie where the doctor is asking Danny some questions.
Now hold your eyes still so I can see. That's good. Now the other one. Good boy. Now, Danny, when you were brushing your teeth, do you remember if you smelled anything funny, or saw any bright flashing lights, or anything at all strange?
No.
Do you remember when you were brushing your teeth?
Yes.
What's the next thing you remember after you were brushing your teeth?
I was saying, wake up, wake up. Wake up, Danny, wake up.
Now, Danny, can you remember what you were doing just before you started brushing your teeth?
Talking to Tony.
So, in a fairly short amount of time, Kubrick has the doctor character saying the phrase brushing your teeth a total of 4 times. And the reason why I'm zeroing in on this is the fact of the matter is that Danny actually wasn't brushing his teeth. And like the issue with the handle to the freezer door and the cold room, this gives us another discrepancy to consider. Now, let's ask ourselves, well, what was Danny actually doing? And as you can see in this clip I'm going to show you here, he was just sort of idly splashing his hand in a basin of water. So if we had to come up with some description as to what Danny was actually doing just before he had his vision of the Overlook Hotel, then we would say that he was in fact laving. He wasn't brushing his teeth, he was laving. And so with that, let's return to this message here. Now, as I've said before, this message from page 193 of Frank Lloyd Wright's Autobiography dovetails very well with the messages that we've seen from Stanley Kubrick. However, the fact is, there's another version of this same message which I think is actually better, and I'd like to spend the last few minutes of this video going into that for you. To lay the groundwork for this new version, consider the 2 young girls that Danny sees in the Overlook Hotel, the 2 ghostly young girls there, these 2 here. Now, in the beginning of the movie, we learn from Stuart Ullman during his interview with Jack Torrance, that they were 8 and 10 years old. And I find this interesting because what we have here is yet another discrepancy in the movie. Because while in the context of the movie these two girls are different ages, in real life they are actually twins, as you can verify. And actually they'll occasionally visit or be guests at shining conventions around the country. Now, you may argue that Kubrick just used these two girls just because they were convenient. They were both about the same age as what he needed. However, when you think about what Kubrick does with them in the movie, it's clear that he is emphasizing the fact that they are twins. We always see them very similarly dressed, and they have the same hairstyles, etc. So Kubrick is emphasizing to us visually that yes, in real life they are actually twin girls. As with all discrepancies and oddities in this movie, we should stop on us and ask ourselves the question, what is going on here and why is Kubrick doing this? And one possible answer has to do with the decoded message that we have here, because when you revisit that decoded message with the word twin in mind, you find something interesting. What I'm getting at is this. As you can see in this slide here, we have the letters necessary to create the word twin. So in revisiting this message with that in mind and reworking it with this in mind, a new message can be created, and as you'll see, I think it's actually better. So this is the new message incorporating the word twin. Now it's fundamentally the same as version number 1, but what I want to do is I want to put both versions side by side and try to make the case that this one is actually the better way to go. In this slide, the first version is on the left and the second version is on the right. The main advantage I can see with version number 1 is that you can spell out the entire name Rothschild. But with version number 2, there are several more advantages. You have the letters to make the term Leo, which is a reference to the Rothschild family crest. There's a lion on the Rothschild family crest. We're using the word twin as, and this explains Kubrick's emphasis on the fact that he was using twins for the two girls in the movie. But most importantly, we have the letters to complete the message there at the bottom, as you can see, and her kids. Keep in mind that Mama had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and they happened to be at Taliesin at the time of the massacre, and they were killed along with her. So overall, I think the version on the right is the better way to go. As I said before, they're fundamentally the same, but from here on out, I'm going to go with version number 2 on the right there. Now, what I want to do is I want to take version number 2 and I want to put it on the same slide as all of the other decoded messages so we can compare them with each other. Version number 2 from Frank Lloyd Wright's Autobiography is up at the top, and at the bottom are all of the messages that have been decoded from the videos that I put out previously. I wanted to do this just to illustrate how well they all agree with each other and dovetail with each other. And towards that end, what I've done is I've highlighted various aspects of these messages, as you can see. I just want to illustrate for you that these messages do support each other. There's a consistency here. I know from reading the comments that there's been some skepticism, and that's fine. But I think what this slide illustrates is that things are really stacking up here. And I think that it's just becoming more and more clear what Kubrick was really up to when he made The Shining. And so with that, I think I'm going to call it a day here. I will be coming out with some new videos soon, and just stay tuned, and I'll see you next time.